Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
So, who are you? What's going on here? I was having coffee by myself, and then you just show up. You raid my tea.
Yeah,
You bite my donut. Like, what's going on?
Hi, everybody. So, I'm Kel. Pronouns she, her, hers. And I'm a therapist.
We have a therapist. We have a therapist in the house, okay? Finally, because I've been talking to myself a lot lately. And I'm like, I need someone to tell me, like, Jackie, actually, have you thought about it this way? And I'm like, okay. We're so happy that you're here, Kel, for so many reasons. Thank you. It is May, which is
Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yes, it is. So what better time to have you come stroll in? This is the first time we actually have a tea drinker.
Yes,
so
I'm not a coffee drinker. Caffeine makes me jittery. It makes me real jittery. I can't do it.
It does jitter. We do jitter a little bit when we do that.
Stress relief tea over here.
My favorite tea. Well, it's I'm so happy that you're here. We're gonna be, chatting about mental health, and we usually open up the conversation with a pretty broad topic,
okay,
and then we'll see kind of where we land. It's really an opportunity to just, if anything comes up, you just bring it up, and we just analyze it, we process it, and I will probably have a lot of questions for you.
Okay,
but
that's good. That's good.
I think that's good, right?
Yeah.
You're probably used to that. So.
I expected that. I expected a lot of questions.
Okay, good. Okay, so the one thing that we seem to be talking about on a pretty regular basis is obviously trust with yourself and confidence and all these things, right? But one thing that I realized with my own therapist that she taught me was this idea of who you were as a child and nurturing that inner child. Yes. So I want to start there. When you think about nurturing your inner child and the work that you do with your patients, what comes up for you?
I would say I'll preface this by saying I'm gonna bring a lot of my personal stuff into this, so some of it won't be as what you would consider therapeutic, right?
Okay.
Because I want it to be a very personal conversation about nurturing your inner child and what that really means, because I think that's how you really get that across, because there's so much language out there about what it truly means to nurture your inner child. So when I think about it, for me, and what I try to instill in my clients is thinking about who you were as a child, right? And thinking about what did you need as a child that you did not get.
Oh my goodness.
And what is a way that you can give that to yourself now, because that's what it's really about. It's almost like reparenting yourself and giving yourself what you need. And so, yeah, what did you need that you didn't get?
Oh my God, I feel like I'm with my therapist right now. Oh my gosh, I'm sweating right now. Okay, so I'll just jump in, I think about 10-year-old Jackie and what does she need. So I was very in tune with my emotions, but I feel like I didn't really have I think my parents weren't used to that. I think that my other siblings were, I guess, not as vocal about their emotions, but I was I didn't know how to. I think I needed some support and guidance of how to manage my emotions. That's one thing that I feel like. And so now I'm at 35, I'm teaching myself, like you said, I'm reparenting myself and being wait, okay.
So question for you.
Okay,
how do you nurture your inner child with that though? How do you allow yourself to do that?
I don't know. Okay, you tell me if this is even a way. I don't know. But what comes to mind is that I think I appreciate, I'm starting to have a deep appreciation for young Jackie, I guess, for 10-year-old Jackie. Mm-hmm. I instead of avoiding this version of myself, I feel like I'm starting to really does this sound weird? I'm communicating with that version of myself?
Not weird at all.
No? Okay, because I'm just I'm thinking about that young girl, and I'm okay, girl, it's okay. I'm kind of nurturing her by even just having conversations or communicating with that version of myself, because I am that part of me that is me.
Yeah.
Okay. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds.
Am I on the right track?
Yeah, you're on the right track. Because that's really what it's about, right? There's several things that if people were more tuned with their emotions and their body and what's coming up for them, right? That something can happen in the day, right? And it can take you right back to that 10-year-old version of yourself, and you can either choose to react like the 10-year-old version of yourself that didn't get what you need, or you can be all right, 10-year-old me, I need this right now, so how do I make sure you get this right now, because that's what's coming out right now.
Oof.
Like, but in the more attuned you get to like realizing those different versions of yourself at the different ages, you can be able to like pinpoint it and like talk about yourself in those terms. Or like, this is 8-year-old me acting like this right now. What do I need?
That's so true. I do feel like when I, and I look back at like even my 20s, right? It's like I'm finally an adult or whatever. I'm in the real world. And like, for example, work stuff, right? You're like, things are happening and I tend to like react to things. And now I look back and I'm like, it's like my young kid self and being like, well, you just like, how do you manage those reactions and those moments?
Yeah.
And I feel like in my 20s, like I look back and I'm like, I should have gone to therapy, like probably in my 20s, like hardcore.
All of us should have.
All of us should have, right? But it's like, I'm just like, but now I think what I'm building is awareness. Okay. Do you think that awareness is a version of nurturing your inner child?
Yes, awareness is definitely a version of nurturing your inner child, because when you are your younger selves, like you're not that aware of the world because you're so young. You have all these big emotions happening within you that you're just not aware of. And so once you get older, you should have a little bit more emotional maturity where you can be a little bit more aware of what's happening. And that awareness is like good. That's why I say like being able to pinpoint it and understand that. But I think, even going back further, that starts with like maybe going to therapy and understanding like where did you have like trauma? What ages did you have like big traumas happen to you where you can be like, all right, like this is that trauma at 6-year-old. So when I'm acting this way, this is my 6-year-old self. What did 6-year-old self need? This is a trauma that happened when I was 10. What did 10-year-old me need? So it goes back to like exploring that trauma stuff so you can understand why you are showing up the way you're showing up.
That T word, trauma. Can we talk about that for a moment?
Yeah,
so people think like, oh, I'm 6 years old. Like, what kind of trauma am I going to have? Can you break it down for us? Like,
yeah.
Because there is trauma. Trauma.
There is trauma. I have this thing, and maybe it's controversial, maybe it's not.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Say, no matter how you raise your child, you can give them what you think is the best life possible. Your child is still probably going to end up in therapy for something in their childhood. If it's like, my parents just gave me too much, and so I didn't know how to be an adult.
I mean,
I feel like no matter what you do, your child is probably going to end up in therapy about something that happened when they were raised. And so, like, thinking about trauma, you may not think that you had trauma at 6, but it can be like those little bitty things. Our little bitty brains are constantly intaking everything that happens around us, no matter what. And I like to tell parents, I'm like, kids are so observant and kids see everything and hear everything. So even though you think that you are keeping your child from things, trust me, kids see and hear everything. Even if it's like they notice a change in your mood after interacting with someone. What trauma is that creating now of being like, well, every time mom goes to visit the in-laws, mom is not feeling so well afterwards. Mom is not in a good mood. Mom's fuse is like short with me on little bitty things. Like, it's just like little bitty things that parents may not realize kids notice, and that can create trauma, because it's not just like the one thing that happens, right? It's what happens after the fact. It's how like you respond after the fact, what continuously happens. And this is like a complete like the way I like to explain this is like on the far end of things, and but for instance, if someone is sexually abused or molested by a family member, right? It's not necessarily the abuse that creates the trauma. What creates the trauma is how this person, even if they tell someone in their family, this person still gets invited to the holidays. They're still sitting at the table. They're still around. Nobody has cut off contact. That creates the trauma. They had this traumatic event, but you're compounding the trauma by allowing this person to still be in there. So think about it like that, with like the little bitty subtle things that are happening on a day-to-day basis for a little child. Where most people may not think it's trauma, but it's just the compounding of everything of like, your kid notices when you're stressed about finances and bills. And so now if you're continuing to be stressed all the time, it's creating this thing. So now when they grow up, they're probably going to have issues surrounding money and finances.
I mean, it's interesting, the domino effect. Yeah. I mean, and I think I'm assuming that's part of why, as adults, it's important that we are taking care of ourselves and, finding good coping mechanisms and good behaviors that, you can't be, no one's perfect, and, kids are going to, perceive things differently and whatnot. You talk about this pinpointing moment of like pinpointing, like, what for you, what helped pinpoint those moments for you, and what helped kind of like, because I think a lot of people like kind of get overwhelmed with tools and mental health. They're like, oh my gosh, like, so what is something that helped you to kind of like pinpoint those moments for yourself?
I mean, my therapist was awesome.
Oh yeah,
yeah, my therapist.
Okay.
I said is still my therapist.
Okay.
My therapist is amazing, and so she kind of helped me get there. She did a lot of like inner child work for me, and so, she started with like basic, like just give me a basic overall history, familiar history.
Okay.
Gave her that. And then she had me think about moments where my needs weren't being met when I was a child, which is hard if you starting that out, thinking about when were your needs weren't when your needs weren't being met.
Yeah, like how do you decipher that?
And I'm like, I don't know, like I have no idea. But we continue to just go through certain things that she learned about me. And she was able to kind of highlight some of those things for me where it sounds like in this moment you needed this, as I was telling her a story about something that happened. And so we were able to get down to like an exact moment, which was kind of like wild to me that I felt like I didn't even really remember. And it was a moment with my biological father where I was like waiting on him to come pick me up. When I was probably about 4 or 5.
Wow.
And I was at my grandmother's house waiting on him to pick me up, and he didn't show up. And so she had me do this thing where like literally close my eyes, put me back in that moment, which was super difficult and hard to do. So make sure you were ready for that.
Yeah.
I would say as a therapist, make sure you have the skills first, the coping skills to deal with whatever is going to come up from these moments. And I had those skills. And so she put me back in that moment and then, started talking about like, what did you need? And, I was able to identify that, like, I needed someone to hug me and tell me it was going to be okay. I needed somebody to, like be there with me and hold my hand. I needed somebody to just tell me that you were good enough. This isn't your fault. Like, all those things that I needed. And then I was able to be like, all right, when I have that same exact feeling again, these are all the things that I need. And I have to figure out how to give it to myself.
It just clicked to me. Oh man. Okay. This is like a golden nugget. Amazing. I as you were talking, they were like, definitely I was thinking about moments where I felt like I needed all of what you just said. So how have you learned to start giving that stuff to yourself? Like, how do you? I'm assuming that's the next point of the process.
I would say you have to find what's best for you, right? And it's not always like this big therapeutic thing to like nurture your inner child. It can be the smallest things. And so for me, I find any moment that I can be a kid. I am a big adult. I'm a grown adult with grown people, bills and things like that. But I find any moment where I can be a kid and I can feel like I'm free. And for me, that's what nurturing my inner child is like feeling like free. So for me, I love to go on like bike rides. I live by the beach. I go on bike rides all the time, and I have my little dog. He sits in a little harness on my chest strapped, and we ride our bike. I ride my bike on the beach path, and for me, that I feel free. So for me, that's nurturing my inner child, where I'm like, I can ride my bike and not think about like anything. And a little tidbit on the bike ride and why it's so important.
Let's hear it.
4th birthday was a birthday that I distinctly remember with my biological father like coming and buying me a bike and things like that. And that was around the time where like all the trauma with him was happening. And so I'm like, I want to reclaim this part of myself with this bike because I still remember that bike. And
reclaim. I love that.
Yeah.
Reclaim.
And so I ride my bike.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And there's so many other things that I would say, if you're fortunate enough like me to find like an amazing partner, my fiance is amazing in helping me to nurture my inner child. I grew up loving Mickey Mouse and my family couldn't afford to take me to Disneyland. And so once we got together, I had never been.
What?
I had never been to Disneyland. And so once we got together for every thing that we do, she takes me to Disneyland and I am like a kid in a candy store, and it is like that's nurturing my inner child. I'm so like happy every time I go.
You should definitely marry her.
Yeah,
you should definitely marry her.
We're getting married.
Yeah, that's so cool. It got me thinking like, why do you think that society, like, what is that idea of like adulthood and how it's like, why are we not I don't know if it's taught or told about like this idea of like that you can still have that I guess childlike, I don't know if it's energy or like spirit in the rest of your life. I feel like there's like this, yes, of course there's the seriousness of being an adult because like, yeah, you have bills and you have more responsibilities, but why is it that you think that society has like played this part of like, no, now you can't, that's for the kids, and now it's like you're blocked off, and it's, what is that about? I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think that people just want to take the fun out of things.
Why though?
They want to take
That's
the
a
fun.
good way of looking at it.
Yeah, just want to take the fun out of things. Like being an adult doesn't have to be like this hard thing. Being an adult doesn't have to be a struggle.
Can we say that one more time, please? What?
Being an adult doesn't have to be a hard thing. It doesn't have to be a struggle. You can still find like the joys in it, and I think that's that's a part that people forget. Is like you can still find like the joys in life, and like tapping into that like childlike self is key to that. I like, if you ever been around kids, I know you've been around a lot of kids. Yeah, I have my nieces and nephews, yeah. And if you sit and you just watch them, it's like the best thing. You notice yourself just smiling all the time, right?
Yes.
Because they're just so free and innocent and happy. And even if something happens and they cry, they get over it so quick, and they're back to being like happy and free and bouncing off the walls again. And it's like, for whatever reason, once we grow up, we lose that little bit of like innocence.
We do.
Like, we get jaded by everything in the world. We get jaded by things in society. And I think that's part of why people forget to like just tap into that childlike self of them and be happy, because we get jaded by everything around us. So
jaded. My therapist told me last year about this idea of, I'm sure this is not new for you, but this idea of your true self and your role self. Familiar with this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So she had me do this exercise where it's like you think about yourself like under 10 years old. Like think about what comes to mind, like moments, things you were into, like all of this stuff. And then you think about yourself now, because I was going through a thing last year where I was like, I really felt like I now recognize that it was a battle between my true self and my role self that were kind of like bumping heads, because I think my true self was finally like, hey, like you've been doing this for 35 years and it's not working. Like I think it's time for me to step in and like, let me tell you what we can do together. I feel like that's what happened with me last year, because I started to even doing this with you, right? Like this right now would not have happened, right? This would not happen right now if I didn't do that, because what you see right now is like, this is very much me at 10 years old. Like, girl, I was like, I would have been like with my camera, like interviewing anybody, filming, like this was me. Like I just would go for it. And I feel like all these years I've been kind of like jaded and like, no, what I've been told, it's like, this is the route. And then I'm like, you know what? No, like I'm done. So my question to you now is, what are some things that were pre-10-year-old Kel that you do bring into your daily life now?
Yeah, that's good. Oh. That's good. Before I answer that, I want to say that's so good that your therapist did that, because I don't know where I heard this at, but someone had told me this, and I was like, oh, I'm going to use that. And I often use it with clients, but I'm just like, go to your like younger self. Like, I don't care how old it is, but what did you genuinely enjoy and love? Like, what brought you like joy and made you feel free? And I'm like, find a way to do that now.
Oh, I like that.
Like, I don't care what it is. Find a way to make that happen.
Ooh.
And people have a hard time with that because they're like, oh, when I was a kid, I like, but I go back to me, like bike riding. I loved riding my bike around the neighborhood with my friends playing games. And it's like, I'm not playing capture the flag on my bike anymore.
Right.
But I make time to ride my bike
every
Sunday.
Yes.
That's a routine. I ride my bike on Sundays because that's when I felt good. And so just continuing that, like in my day-to-day life, bike riding. I loved sports growing up. I'm from Texas, so huge like football family. My life growing up was centered around like sports and football, and so I'm huge into sports. I'm always watching anything that's considered a sport. I probably watched it on TV. I will watch anything that's a sport. I make time for that. Like, I wake up in the morning, and the first thing I do is I turn on ESPN.
Really?
ESPN. Every morning, first thing I do, I wake up, I turn on ESPN. How people turn on the news, I'm like, nope. I just want to like see all the highlights from all the sporting events. Mind you, I probably watched the games the night before. I probably read the articles that at night before I went to bed. But I still wake up, I turn on ESPN because sports was something that connected me to my family. It was something I loved. It brings me joy when I think about playing sports with my little cousins, things like that. And so I watch it every morning to connect to that.
I love that. It's like you really are making an effort to connect with your inner child. But it's also like you're taking a time to really connect with yourself. Like I think, right? Like that's really the bottom line is like, yes, we can say our inner child, but at the end of the day, that's still you. You're connecting with yourself. And I think we, sometimes we get busy with life and things happen. And before you know it, you hit a point where you're like, what is happening?
Yeah.
But I think the fact that you're making, and this is something Riley and I talked about, is making conscious decisions.
Yes.
So you're like literally making these, because I always see you and you're always like, dude, chill, like chill vibes, like, your boundaries, you know what I mean? Like you're living the life that you're building the life that you want for yourself. And even these things like going on these bike rides, these routines, with these sports, like to me, I think that's always so invigorating to find people who are just like, they just know themselves so well and they own it. They're doing their thing. And I think that's the I don't know. I feel like now I'm starting to see that's really a result of that work.
Yeah, you use the word conscious, like conscious effort. I use the word intentional.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about intentional.
Yeah, like you have to be intentional about the changes you want to make. You have to be intentional about the life you want to live. You have to be intentional about the people you want in your life. You have to like be intentional about it and like actually make a conscious effort and be like, all right, if I want to be a better version of me and I want to nurture my inner child, I have to be intentional about putting it on a schedule every day, where it just becomes a part of me, where it just becomes a part of what I do. And I'm not thinking about it. You don't think about brushing your teeth every morning. You just wake up and you brush your teeth. It's just it's a habit. It's what you do. And so nurturing your inner child has to become the same thing. It has to become a habit where you just do it without ever thinking about it. And I'm very big on, I use this thing with my clients too. I'm like, be proactive instead of reactive.
Ooh, say that again. Wait. That's a good one.
Be proactive instead of reactive. And that is big, especially like people go to therapy all the time, right? And they teach you like, use your coping skills. And I'm like, you shouldn't be using your coping skills only when something happens and you get triggered. I'm like, be proactive instead of reactive. Like, be using your coping skills all the time, every single day, so that when something does happen, it's just a habit and you can just do the thing and you're out of it that quick. As opposed to when you try to be reactive to it and you're trying to use your coping skills, you're like, oh, that coping skill's not working. That coping skill's not working. And now you're spiraling.
I love that. Oh my goodness. You basically describe, so Anna's very good at that. Anna's just like, that's just the way it's good to have a partner that for me, it's like, she helps me,
Yeah.
But I think that's, and she's like, Jackie, I haven't always been this way. She's like, I did the work. She did the work when she was in her 20s, And I'm like, I guess I should have done a little bit more effort. Which that lends me to another question. It's like this idea of like, when you're intentional. So when people are not intentional, like, what does that look like? Like,
I think when you're not intentional, you are constantly wondering, like, how is this happening again? How am I here again? Like, and it's like, because you're not being intentional about doing the things that you need to do right now. You're not being intentional about nurturing your inner child.
Oof.
That's why you're back here again.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And a lot of the times I really bring this part up because I think a lot of people, I know for me, like last year I was looking up content of like, oh my God, I was like in the thick of it. It's like, how do you push yourself forward to like start using the tools, like start really, taking like hearing what you're saying and really plugging it in. Like, what do you find helpful when you're working with people of like, what kind of helps to spark people in that direction of starting to do that kind of work?
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part, right? Because when you first start going to therapy, the first part is becoming aware. And then once you're aware, that's the next part. People are always like, well, I'm aware of what's happening and why it's happening, but I don't know what to do now.
Yes. Yes, it does happen.
Right? And so I think that other part is like, how do you spark it? I usually try to get very personal with my clients where I find out something that brings them joy, back to this whole thing, something that brings them joy. And I'm like, we're going to start there. Don't start with like, a lot of the skills that you're taught, in therapy where I'm like, all right, breathing exercise and things like that. Those things work. By all means, they work. But let me start you off with something that you enjoy. So like if I have a client that enjoys art, I'll tell them like, hey, between this week and next week when I see you, do some art. Go back to doing some art. You haven't touched your art in a while. And then they'll do some art. They'll share it with me. And then they'll realize after a while, like, my mood is kind of improving by doing this thing because I really love like doing art.
Subtle, huh?
Like, So I try to be very specific and find something that they love and that brings them joy. And I'm like, do that thing just once between this week and next week. You don't even have just one time, and usually they'll do it and it'll just start to happen.
I love that. And it really, I think it affirms this idea of like, it truly is a process. Like you said, like you just do it once and then you start doing it again. You just like, don't put the pressure on. I like that. You remind me of my therapist because so I have a different therapist now who's great too. But the one that was really helping me through the thick of it was like, she told me like she asked me like what brings you joy, and I was like, I really like to express myself and this and that. And so that's when it was a very slow process. It was like, she didn't like push me. It wasn't like it was like okay, like your push was like try it out, like just And so I did, and then I slowly started like continue to do it, and it really helped the process.
Yeah, and I think that's an important piece, that process and how slow it can be, because people want results like fast, right? It's like, oh man, I feel terrible and I need you to make me feel better now.
Yeah, DoorDash that right now. Let's DoorDash it.
Right, and it's just like, it takes time. It takes time. Be patient. It'll happen for you. Like you just got to take time.
Yeah, and be happy with. I don't know. For me, I think what helped me was just like in those moments, I just appreciated like. I just took it really down to the basics. Like I was like, I just appreciate today.
Yep.
I appreciate this walk. Like I really, I really made it very simple for myself, because making it any more complex was too much. It was too heavy, right? So I just like really broke it down. Like, okay, I'm feeling a little better today than yesterday. Cool.
Yeah. So how did you? I'll ask you a question.
Oh God, okay, let's do it. I'm like, ah.
So because I think this is important, right? Because people always want to know things like this. So when you did start to feel better each day and you got to a place where you were consistently feeling better, how did you handle when all of a sudden
things weren't
good?
It's funny because I find myself now, even now, and my therapist does tell me, she's like, I do find myself, I see, I'll say this, I definitely see a growth in my reactions and being proactive. I do see a growth in that. But because the moments where I'm like, wait, because I'm so aware, even when I have a slip up, I do acknowledge, and I'm proud of like the progress I've made, that it doesn't, I guess because of that, it doesn't weigh me down as much. And so I'm able to kind of get up again, right? Whereas I think in the past, I wasn't aware. I was so in my feelings that it was really hard for me to get back up again. Yeah. So I think, did I even answer your question?
Yeah.
Did I?
Yeah, that's good. I honestly, I was going to stop you because I'm like, that's the key right there, what you just said.
Oh, what was it?
Like, it was the fact that, like, you have become more aware through the work, and it was a slow process for you. So when you do get down again, like, you can get back up again.
I can get up again.
You know that because you've done it already.
Yes.
So it doesn't weigh you down as much. Like that part right there.
Yeah,
because it's going to happen. Like,
it's going to happen, y'all.
Just because you go through and you do all this work, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden now you're going to be so happy every single day.
No, that's not going to happen. But
right? But when things happen, you don't allow it to weigh you down. You know you can get back up again. So.
Oof. And my friend told me the other day, actually, she's like, Jackie, like, you have the tools. She's like, you just don't want to go to the garage and grab the toolbox, but you have them now. And I was like, you are right. I was like, because like, or like, when we literally, that speaks to me because we live, we have our garage downstairs. So like, if we run out of toilet paper, I'm just like, oh, who's going to go get it? It's like, you have it, there's assurance and awareness of like, we know we're not going to be running out of it, but I got to go downstairs. I have to make the effort. So that brings me to the next question of this idea of like effort and mental health. And I think I never realized how much of an effort it takes to, just like in any part of your life, your physical health, emotional health, there is an element of effort, but I think it goes back to that intention, right? Of like, okay, well, I have to do that. So that is something that is the thing that helps me, but it's the same thing that is challenging, is effort.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard. I think even just getting started, right? When you tell someone like, hey, this is going to be a process, people are like, oh, like, do I really want to go through all of this?
A process?
Like, do I want to go through all of this? But I'm telling you, if you put in the effort and you go through the process, it's so good. I was just having this discussion with the client that I'm seeing, and we're down to like once a month now.
Oh, right on.
And we've been seeing each other for almost 3 years now.
Wow.
And we're down to once a month. And
amazing.
And I was telling her, I was like, man, like I can't like.
Aww.
I was like, I don't even recognize you. You're like a different person. And she was like, if you would have told me when we first started working together how long and hard this journey would have been, she was like, I would have quit. She was like, I definitely would have quit. She's like, but I'm so happy now that like this is where I'm at. And I'm like, yeah,
that's what it's about.
That's what it's about. Because it is like if you're talking about it, I'm like, hey, it took my client probably 2.5, 3 years to get here. Most people are like, definitely not trying to do that. I'm out.
Well, you're building, it's my behavior. I've had it most of my life. So how am I going to expect, even a year to just undo all that work? It's like, that's, I think that to me is like, the math makes sense then, that it's going to take a little longer, because I'm like, well, if I'm trying to, but I'm really happy that I am letting my true self like take stock or take place here, because that to me is like, I always tell myself, I'm like, I made a promise to myself. I didn't make it to Anna or anybody else. Like, this is for Jackie, and like, I think that to me has helped me in this, in putting in the effort. It's like, well, I made a promise to myself, and like, and I know what it looks like when I don't do that.
Yep.
And that is a very hard place to be. And I think I owe it to myself to like make the effort so that I can protect myself, like be there for me, like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's good. I have this phrase I tell all my clients, and I usually tell them in the first session that we're working together.
Okay.
I'm like, I know that like selfish has a negative connotation. I was like, but for the first time in your life, I need for you to be selfish right now. Like I tell all of my clients that in our first intake session, because I'm like, I need for them to really focus on themselves and be like, this time is for me. I'm like, it is not negative for you to like give to yourself right now, outside of what anybody else needs and outside of what anybody else thinks. This is your time to be selfish. This is your one time where you can do it.
You're good. You're good. And, that's good.
And I think it helps, like what you're saying. Like, you made that promise to yourself.
Yes.
And it's not about Anna, it's not about anybody else. It's all about you. And I think that's what yields the best results when you can do that in therapy and be like, I'm going to do this despite what anyone else thinks. And I'm going to always, like, focus on me and what I said I was going to give to myself.
Yes. And this is going to sound cheesy, but I'm just going to say it. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised. But I think another thing that kept me motivated was, like, and this does go back to nurturing your inner kid, but it's like, I don't know, I started to smile again. Like when you look at the mirror and you're like, who is this? And I started to like really see Jackie and like really see like very genuine, like smiles for myself to myself, like I started to like really, I hate to say I really feel myself. I'm not trying to say that. I'm trying to say, can you help me here? Like, I feel like it was like, finally there was like, the noise was out. Like all the noise was away, wasn't there, and it was just like this self-relationship that
your true self, your most ideal self, your authentic self.
Yes
Yeah And I think that's hard to get to for a lot of people. I think that a lot of people go through things, and if they are looking at themselves in the mirror, it's just not, it's like this version
of themselves,
like a version of themselves, right? And it takes a lot of work to get to a point where you're just like, all right, like I am this version and I'm okay with that. My favorite podcast is this lovely Jamel Hill, and she has this podcast called Jamel Hill is Unbothered, and she interviews a lot of people, a lot of prominent people, especially in the Black community. And she always asks the people, when did you first become unbothered? That's the question that she asks every guest that.
So can I ask? Is that okay? I'm gonna go ahead and ask. We'll put her information in the description.
Okay, that's fine. And so I always think about that. And I listen to this podcast every Monday.
Sounds really cool.
So every time she asks,
did you already listen to it today?
I listened to last week's today.
Okay.
Yeah, I listened to last week's today. Okay. And so I always think about it. Every single time she asks a guest, I think about it for myself too. And I'm just like, share? And I think that that's what getting to your most like ideal and authentic self is getting to this place of being unbothered. And so for me, I don't know that it's that like I'm unbothered by like things that people say or do. For me, I guess the unbothered thing means that I'm not affected by the things that people say or do. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna think about it.
Sure.
And yeah, it may like bother me a little bit, but I'm not affected by it. It's not gonna change how I walk through my life or how I respond or what I do, you know. And that's what I consider like unbothered. Because if, you know, back in the day, I'm bothered by it. Yeah, I'm gonna react in a certain way. I'm gonna respond to people in a certain way based on what they say about me, how they react, how they surround me, things they say to me. But now, if it happened, I'm just like, okay, I hear it. It got to me a little bit, but you're not gonna change who I am and how I show up. I'm still gonna show up as me because I'm secure in who I am.
When did this happen? When was that moment?
Oh man, this has been a journey.
Yeah,
this has been years in the making. I would say. I started the process when I started going through grad school to be a therapist, because it was the first time in my life where I could be openly gay. And that was like a huge thing. It was the first space in my life where I can just be like, oh yeah, like I'm queer and that's okay.
Amazing.
And so it started then, and I would say like it's kind of, you know, transcended being with my fiance now because her family is the most open and welcoming family. They don't treat us any differently, and I'm around them a lot. I'm in Southern California. I'm in Long Beach, where everywhere I go, there's another queer person, and that was a big part of me being bothered. My identity as a queer person was a huge part of me being bothered. And so once I was like, okay, like this is who I am and I'm good with that, I started my process of being unbothered, where nobody's words or anything like faze me. You know, I come up against homophobia, and while it may bother me, it doesn't change how I respond or how I act or how I show up. I'm continuing to show up as myself no matter what. And I'm like, I'm not going to allow your words to make me get out of character, your homophobia to make me act a certain way, because I'm secure in who I am, and that's your own shit. That has nothing to do with me. So.
That's amazing. I'm like getting goosebumps here. I think that's powerful, and I'm really happy for you. And I think that's, I don't know that I'm there yet, but I love that you are there and that it's possible. I think it's very cool. I like the way you're describing it, this idea of like, yes, it can bother you, but it's not going to affect or change the way you live your life. I think that's the goal. That's the goal. I think part of that is I look at you and I see this and I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm like, I think you really, you have a lot of self-love, you value your voice, you value your experience. Yes? Is that true?
All of those things.
All those
yes.
things. Amazing. And that is like, I think that's powerful to get to that point. And I think a lot of us, for example, my obstacles to get to that point is, I'm happy that you brought up the queer thing, because I think that's it's a biggie. My therapist, like I never really said like, oh, I'm a gay person or I'm gay, you know, like it's not, I don't know, it just, and she told me, she's like, say it. She's all, say it, Yaki. And I was like, okay, I'm gay. And like, I couldn't say it. It was so weird. Yeah. I never thought about it. And she told me, she's like, because I've had to really like mask myself most of my life in different ways, like, you know, even through, you know, the last couple of years, like with my nieces and nephews. And she told me, she's like, you know, she said, allow yourself, you give yourself permission to be who you are. And I think that has been a big obstacle for me. And now I'm like, I think that's why my true self is finally like, hey, like, you know, give it up, like own it, you know? And so I do find myself this year, finally, at least becoming aware, that's where I'm in the process, that I do have a voice, and I would get affected a lot by what people say and this and that, but it's like, wait, no, I don't have to react. I can hear these people, I can be unbothered, I can whatever, but I have the choice. I can speak for myself, and I never, like, it was just, didn't occur to me, you know? And it took, honestly, like, getting married and having my family there and everybody there to, like, that part of my life, too, to be like, okay, like, I am a queer woman. I have a wife. And, like, even yesterday, like, we had Mother's Day, and I was hugging Anna, like, and I was like, this is my partner, this is my wife, you know? And I didn't do that in the past. But I'm just like, and there was definitely a moment where I was like, oh my God, am I doing this? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Like, it's fine. You know, like, it's on me, you know? It's like, I need to own it and just be like, so I'm in the process.
Yeah, giving yourself permission to just be. And it's like, however everybody else responds to you hugging, if they respond to you hugging your wife, like, that's on them. It has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, that's on them. So I'm on my way, but I'm really happy for you. And it's like aspirational to have someone like you in my life that's like there, and I'm like, okay,
yeah,
I can do this.
Oh, it's a process. It is a process.
It is a process.
And,
word of the day.
Yeah, and I will say that, and you and I have kind of had like a private conversation about this. For me, I do think that my situation is a little different. That I can do that is because I'm from the South, where I come from a very religious Southern Baptist family, but none of my family lives here. Mm-hmm. I don't have any of my family here with me, so I am sort of removed from any of the judgments that may be there, any of the little sly comments or looks that I may get. So I don't have to ever really think about like hugging my fiance or kissing my fiance. I don't have that because her family is completely different. Mm-hmm. Like, we are super affectionate around one another, and it's no big deal. And you know, I say that, but I'm like, I'm not sure how it'd be if I'm in Texas with my family and I'm with my fiance. I can't say that I would like not think twice about hugging her or kissing her in front of family members. I don't know. I might do that. I always say that when we go back to our homes, our childhood homes with our family, we become like this less evolved version of ourselves.
What is that about?
I think that it all just comes back, right? Our bodies know that we're
back. They
back.
know it. They like perceive
they
it.
know the things that we've been through. They know the trauma, right? Or thinking going back to this inner child, right? Go back to that little kid version of you who was like probably queer, just couldn't say anything, you know? And so we tend to do that. We become these less evolved versions of ourselves when we are around them sometimes, especially if you've been a person who you've kind of gotten space from your family and you've grown a lot and you've kind of outgrown like emotionally your family, because we are in therapy and a lot of our family members, you know, who are not like, nope, not going to therapy.
They're working on it.
We don't do that, right? You just become this less evolved version of yourself. And so I don't know that I wouldn't become that version of myself if I was back home with my fiance, but I'm privileged in that way. I recognize that I can be unbothered, so to speak, because I'm not around them and I don't have to deal with that.
Well, that actually reminds me. I'm like, I'm gonna play therapist right now.
Oh, therapist. Okay.
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, actually, it's my therapist that told me this, but I'll channel
turning.
her. Yeah, I'm channeling her now. Okay. Well, because part of what I'm also realizing is that, like, so I'm reading this book called The Power of Now. Have you heard of this book?
Yes.
Okay. And so a lot of the times, like, for me, the past is like, yes, it obviously informs my present, inform my future. But I've realized how to kind of like manage how much I bring that in to what I do, who I am. And it reminds me a lot of, I know this is going to sound crazy, but let's go for it, right? Okay. So I've come to realize that, like, you know, when you lose someone, you know, when you grieve someone passing, like, so for example, for me, my grandmother, was very close to her, but what brings me comfort is that, like, she truly is a part of me. Like, so I miss her a lot and stuff like that, but I was so connected to her that I feel so connected to her even in this day. Like, she is like literally a part of me. Like, you know, I talk to her, you know, I do. I talk to her. I feel her. Like, literally, it's crazy, dude. Like, a few days before my wedding, I was driving to go get my nails done with my sisters. I was driving on the freeway and I'm telling you, I felt her presence and I just started crying, but like in a joyful way. It was like, I felt like, she's like, I am happy for you. I'm here for you. It was like, I felt like, it was like a spiritual connection, right? So I'm like, that brings me comfort in knowing that, like, even though she's no longer here in the way that I'm used to, having her be a part of my essence, my being, and all that stuff, it reminds me of how, when I think about my past and the things that have hurt me and whatnot, and how do I channel that in today? It's like, there's some comfort in knowing that like, I'm not that person anymore, but that person is a part of me. Just like my grandma is a part of me. Yeah. But today I'm a woman who's married, who's doing the work, who's taking chances, who has had like really great work experience and good friendships. And like, I am not the 15-year-old girl. I'm not a 22-year-old. And yet I am all of those things. Yeah. But I'm also the person I am today. Yeah. Does that make any sense? Like, yeah. Can you break it down? Because I think I got a little long-winded here.
No. So you're saying that, like, right? And I like how you talked about it in terms of grief and how you always carry your grandma with you, how she's always with you, right? Because you are, like, all those versions of you are still a part of you. They make up the person that you are right now. It's like you can honor those parts of you, acknowledge those parts of you, even the messy and the bad and the hurtful pieces of you.
Especially those.
Because they have made you who you are now. Like, you wouldn't be the Jackie you are now with all those pieces, so you carry them with you all the time. Is that
sums it up? That sums it up. Yeah. And so when I think about what your story about like going to Texas is like, yes, we do revert to our younger selves, but also I encourage you that whenever that dig happens, or if you want to want to explore that experience, is to step into that place as you are today. The one that just told me what you just said about not being bothered with owning your voice. Yeah. Because you're that person too. And that person can, you know what I'm saying? So that's what I encourage you, is like that person does exist.
Gotcha.
So you can step into it.
I will carry that with me for sure when I go back.
Because it's like you have to acknowledge like who you are now and why you've done the work, and that's so awesome that you can be that person right now. So. Sure. So yeah, the present matters too, It
does.
It does.
I like that. Reading The Power of Now, huh?
Oh yeah, it's a great book. We talk about they talk about like clock time and psychological time. And all that stuff. So I'm not done with the book yet, but it's been really helpful to me. So I don't know if you have any books that you like.
All right, recommend. Book plugs right now.
Yes, please,
all right,
please.
I don't know the author's name, but a book that my therapist had me read, and I recommend it to a lot of my clients that I have. Okay. It's a super easy read, super thin, light book. It's called There's Nothing Wrong with You. And it's purple and white. So if you just Amazon, There's Nothing Wrong with You, purple and white. Okay. Cover, and love the book. It is just, man, it's just like all the little things that you feel like are wrong with you. Like this book, like kind of takes you through a journey of like, well, this is why. This is why you're like this, because this probably happened in your life. This probably happened. So this is why. There is nothing wrong with you. Like,
I love that.
There is a reason for all of these little things that come up,
I love that.
So,
okay.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with you.
There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with us. So I do want to, what time are we at? Well, we're pretty good. We're at 50 minutes. Okay. So Ari, I think one thing that you and I think unifies us is, being gay, being gay women, and being in homes that, probably was not, not super, very religious, conservative. I grew up in a Mexican household. So it definitely was, it wasn't, so the reason why I want to bring this up is like, you think about nurturing your little kid. And, I remember being 8, 9 years old and like, I already knew that I was gay. I don't know that I had the words for it. Okay. But I knew, and this is what got me thinking about like, that's why I even have even more of a like empathy for younger Jackie, because it's like when you're a kid and you start to experience like crushes and like these things that are very natural and human, like, right? Yeah. And then the world, your home is telling you like there's no place for your feelings like that. So now you've like automatically have shut down what you naturally want to feel, like what other kids get to feel, but you don't get to feel that. And so then you start to kind of like ignore. For me, I was like, oh no, I don't feel this way. I like this boy, and
I would say got a couple boyfriends in there just to be maybe I like him.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, how do you when you think about that layer that some folks who are not part of the community like have, it's like, how because I want to, obviously want to nurture my inner child, but I also know that inner child was like also hurting in a way, or like, was lonely in a way. And I don't know if that ladders up to what you were saying earlier about like, well, you have to just meet those needs. Like, I don't know what you want to speak to as far as like the queer part of it.
Yeah, I think that find your community now, like as an adult. I think that's how you nurture that. I'm, very big on like finding the LGBTQ community now and finding my way to like give back. I work at the center because that's big for me to make sure that I am a part of training all these clinicians who are going to go off into the world.
Huge.
And even though they may be not a part of the community, I always tell all of my the clinicians that work under me, I'm like, when you leave here, you may be the only person at the job that you take that can provide affirming therapy. And I want to make sure that the one LGBTQ person that walks in that office, that everybody else is just like, we don't know what to do. You're the one person that can do it.
Amazing.
And so I feel like that's part of what I do. I try to like give back to the LGBTQ community in any way that I can. And I encourage people to find community in the LGBTQ community. Like go to Pride and meet people. Like, we are all super friendly.
Very friendly. Very friendly.
If you go to Pride, guarantee you are walking away with like at least 5 friends at the end of the night who you didn't know when you got there. It's going to be like you knew each other the whole time and you're going to be partying all night. Like, go to Pride. Find community.
Yes.
I love, and you like the site, Meetup. Meetup.com.
Oh, well, why? Well, that is a good one.
Jackie loves Meetup. But meetup.com, whenever I have moved to a different city and state, I always go to meetup.com and I find like the queer groups. I'm always like, what am I interested in? Like in Long Beach, I found I was like, I want to play flag football. Is there any queer flag football? And then, only met up with them like twice, but there was like all these queer folks came together.
Amazing.
We played flag football on the beach.
Amazing.
And I was like, all right, I met some queer folks in Long Beach. Like, it's cool. And so, like, being intentional, back to that word, too, about finding that community to nurture your inner child. Because once you get in those circles with other people and you have conversations like this, you'd be like, oh, I grew up kind of like that, too. Like, my family wasn't accepting either. And now these people become, like, your chosen family, which is a big thing in our community.
Big thing.
Like, you get that chosen family.
I love that. And I think I like that you're bringing it back to being intentional. I think you have to be intentional, active, conscious in what you're building and what you want around you. And I think that's a great way to kind of cope with what you did experience and find the community and find people that you can relate to. I think that's wonderful. I was also very intentional in going to meetup. I didn't know that I was going to meet my wife at the meetup. But
look at that.
But
met her wife at a meetup. Did you hear that, people? She met her wife at a meetup.
Yeah. So it's like you never know what will happen. But I was very open that day. I will say that. Like I was very open and to whatever the universe, I just was open to meeting new people. And I think there's a lot of good people out there. There's a lot of bad people. There's a lot of good people though.
It is.
Yeah. So what are do you have any final thoughts as far as the nurturing your inner child for folks?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to kind of wrap up kind of what we've been talking about the entire time. Be intentional about it. It's not something that's just going to happen for you. You have to be intentional about going out and doing those things and finding those things. Start off by figuring out what your needs are, like what you needed that you didn't get as a child, and find out how to give that to yourself. And just have fun and find the things that create joy. That is how you are going to nurture your inner child. Like the things that create the most joy for you. Think back to your little self. And you're going to think back to your little self and think about what you needed and find pain in order to figure out how to nurture that. But also think about what brought you joy. What made you really, really happy. Do more of that. And that's how you're going to nurture the inner child.
And there's nothing wrong with you. We'll put that book in the description. Yeah. And then what was the name of the podcast again?
Jamel Hill is Unbothered.
Love it. Love it. Well, Kel, thank you for joining our coffee chat.
Yeah.
Coffee tea chat.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.